Okay, we're broadcasting live with the Greening Government Speaker Series. My name is Ted Ritzer. I'm the host of the series, and the series is a collaboration between the Municipal Climate Change Action Center and my department, Alberta Environment and Parks, and the newly created Alberta Climate Change Office. So today we're really fortunate to be joined by a speaker. Actually, it was highly recommended by David Dodge with the Green Energy Futures webinar series. David said, "Yeah, you gotta get Lethbridge Biogas and Stefan to present." And in my work on the speaker series, the research that I've done, it seems like Europe and Scandinavia are really leading within the bioenergy field, and we're really fortunate to be able to have Stefan Michalski with Lethbridge Biogas. Stefan, in our little chat before air, you had mentioned that a person from Fort McLeod had got you interested way back in 2001, a farmer from Fort McLeod. So it's really interesting that that farmer from Fort McLeod started this whole story. So now I'll turn it over to Stefan to do the main event, the presentation on Lethbridge Biogas. Thanks so much, Stefan.
Okay, thank you, Ted. Yeah, I made the mistake 12 years ago to listen to somebody that said to me, come over for a couple of months and work with me on this. And 12 years later, I'm still sitting here. So that's a little bit how this all came together. But I don't want to start there. I want to talk today about not only Lethbridge Biogas, but a little broader about biogas anaerobic digestion in a bigger picture, and why we are seeing things maybe in other parts of the world and not so much on our doorstep. I will have three parts in this presentation. I'm going to start off with a quick overview of what biogas is and what we're talking about. We'll go into some of the historical events and some of the other markets that we'll see grow in Europe specifically, and then come back to Canada, Alberta to see where things are at, and then I'll finish off with the story that Lethbridge Biogas went through, which is an interesting one, to make things happen and put that in a political context of today in Alberta, which is certainly a very favorable one. So let's dive into it. I hope this is an interesting journey for you. For those of you who are not so familiar with anaerobic digestion, I want to have a quick intro into the science. I will keep this very unscientific and apologize right away to the scientists that are on the call that expect details on that, but I think it's more helpful to keep that a little bit more generic here. So the science about anaerobic digestion is really not too deep. I would say it is, but it isn't. We have a natural process where organic matter breaks down through the activity of various bacteria, and this leads to the creation of essentially methane gas. You see the chart here in the presentation. The components that are valuable are carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, and they break down in various steps, which typically happen all in the system at once, kind of thing. They break down into various components before we create the methane. We do create that methane from a technology perspective then to typically do one of two things. With it, we have the still most common technology platform is to use the biogas in what's called a cogeneration unit or combined heat and power unit, which essentially takes the gas, produces electricity and heat from an engine. These engines are reciprocating engines like an engine in your vehicle. They are a little bigger though, and the heat is a is a product that we need also to supply our process with, because anaerobic digestion works better in a heated environment, and there's various levels at which you can operate. So that's the one avenue. The other avenue is, which becomes more and more popular all over the world, is upgrade the biogas to a natural gas standard and put it into natural gas pipelines, which then can be used like natural gas is used elsewhere. A side avenue of that is compressed natural gas, or then compressed biogas, which is used as vehicle fuel. I'll go to that when we go into different markets. So that's what really anaerobic digestion is about. We have organics, we have an anaerobic digester, we have a product that is gas that we can use, and we have an output that is a liquid and or solid fertilizer. That is a interesting product, but I get to that in a minute. From a feedstock perspective, this chart just should tell you that there's a lot of organic feedstocks to be used, which have a very different outcome. We see here, this chart talks about cubic meter per tons. So this is the biogas output, cubic meters per tons. You see that manures are on the bottom end, and then we have a factor of 20, 25 to 30 almost more energy production when it comes to the organics that include more proteins and fats, like waste grease, for example, 600 as opposed to 25. So really the trick and the science and the know-how in anaerobic digestion is how to best put these together to make a recipe that creates the most gas and is most stable from a process perspective. On the benefit side, why is this all good, and why we are doing this? Biogas is one of these things that there's no really downside to the story. Everybody wins, but that's also sometimes the story is too perfect and it's too difficult to understand and makes too much sense. And that's why we're having sometimes the trouble that we're having. We're tying into a lot of different spheres, right? We have environmental benefits, of course. Nowadays, everybody's talking about reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. Biogas is a renewable energy, so we are contributing to that. But we're also producing a product here that is causing less environmental impact. When we talk about land application of manure, for example, this product combines manure and other sources. It is the anaerobic digestion process converts it to a more homogenized product. It is easier for plant roots to take, which has impact on groundwater contamination, especially down here in our area. We are in the Old Main watershed. That's a topic that is a very important one. Downside of that is we create a value that is not really reflective in the compensation we get for what we're doing. Part of the problem of biogas. One big thing in the bigger picture on the energy side is we are creating, typically when we go the electricity route, we're producing power 24/7. We are a non-intermittent source of renewable energy as opposed to the intermittent ones like wind and solar, which need backup. We divert organic material from landfills, so we extend the life of the landfills, which is important these days. So there's a lot of benefits here that come with this. Like I said, it's a perfect story, but the monetary compensation is not always there. That's why we struggle a little bit with these things here, typically in North America. So last one, almost last one is on the interface here. So the business model that typically you see for anaerobic digestion facilities, you have output products like electricity or natural gas, renewable natural gas, or you have a fertilizer. And then in some markets, you are creating offset credits, you're reducing greenhouse gases, and you're diverting, I said that before, you divert organics from landfill. So these are all potential sources of income. Some of them are more dominant than others, depending on the jurisdictions you're in and depending on how the framework is set up. But these are all potentials that are out there. And really the idea of this whole thing, of this whole biogas thing is the one man's waste is the other man's treasure philosophy. So we take products that are typically go to waste, we take these, we make another product out of it, we add value, we bring that product back to the source, which is the land, and the land starts growing things and start provide food for the animals again, and when we get the products back from primary and secondary processing. So it's a circular economy, a value-added concept, and that's the idea behind it. Coming now to the history and why are things different in other parts of the world. Just a quick one. This one, the interesting thing is we have anecdotal evidence as going back into the 10th century BC of biogas. More recently, in the 1800s, it was detected that manure has to do with emissions of methane. And then really the trigger for the modern area of anaerobic digestions was the oil and energy crisis in the late 70s. And I remember those days when I was a child. We had in Europe, I'm from Europe, I'm from Germany originally, and we had on Sundays, we had, it was not allowed to drive your vehicles to save fuel and oil, and we had roads closed, and I was living in a mountainous area as a child, and we used some of these roads to go tobogganing. So that was I still remember those days. Let's talk about, so the main market drivers that really started this in Europe was to reduce the dependency on imported fossil fuel, triggered by the oil crisis, the Middle East, Iraq, Iran. Governments realized that there's something else that needs to be done other than importing oil. Europe is a more populated and crowded space, for sure, than North America is, for sure than Canada is. So reduction of volume, restrictions on landfill space was another big one. And then, of course, we entered the area of climate change and greenhouse gas emissions, and the added benefits here of job creation and value-added opportunities for agriculture were all part of the story, all driven by the very ambitious targets of European governments to say, hey, we need to do better and we need to increase the share of this in the future. When I started my career in anaerobic digestion in the early 90s, we took clients up to Denmark to show them what the Danish government and the Danish people did. So that Denmark was one of the pioneers in anaerobic digestion in the early 80s. You see, Denmark was 90% of Denmark's energy supply was imported oil, so that's the dependency on foreign oil that triggered this. Denmark really came up with this idea about centralized plants. Centralized plants just means rather than to have a plant on farm to deal with a specific source of material, take the plant to a more central location and connect different sources of feedstock to that plant, and by that gain efficiency, create a mix that we talked about of various feedstock and increase outputs. Denmark really started with that in the 80s. Another interesting one that I want to mention here, Denmark also introduced this as a concept to redistribute nutrients, nitrogens in particular, because they saw nitrogen overloading happening all over the place. And if you can picture a centralized plant where one delivers manure from one place and then the end product gets maybe to a different place. So that's a way of redistributing nutrients a little bit around. Another feature in Denmark that you often see when you go there, district heating is very popular in Europe. So the waste heat that the engines produce gets transferred via a heat exchanger into so-called district heating networks. Essentially, it's hot water heating. A lot of communities are set up for that. So Denmark was the pioneer in connecting these facilities into their municipal heating infrastructure. Very interesting to see. Denmark has a goal now to supply 100% of their energy by renewables by 2015. Sweden is another one. These pictures I took on an excursion here in 2008, I believe. Sweden has introduced biogas into the municipal landscape really by using or pointing, putting an emphasis on using it as a vehicle fuel. The infrastructure there is quite remarkable. A lot of cities run their bus fleets on biogas. When we were invited to Sweden back in the day, I was told I meet Amanda, and I was really excited until I found out it was a train. But there's a train running on biogas converted diesel engine. So there's a lot of interesting things happening in that part of the world. Sweden wants to be fossil free in the transportation sector by 2050. So a little different spin on goals, on the goal. But that's how that comes about. Of course, then we can't really avoid talking about Germany because of the vast number of facilities that have been built there in the last 20 years. In 2016, this year, the number of facilities is close to 69,000, with a bigger than 4,000 megawatt installed capacity. To put that in perspective, Alberta has 16,000 megawatt of installed capacity today. So approximately, so we're talking about 25% of that from biogas alone. There's about 8.4 million households supplied with electricity from biogas. Interesting topic is the range of sizes. We go from very small plants, smaller than 100 kilowatts, to very big plants. Biomethane facilities, renewable natural gas facilities are increasingly popular too. The industry really took off in the last 20 years, becoming a major player from a job creation perspective, something that is an interesting feature. And more than that, interestingly than that, we're talking about the support mechanisms that have been applied to get there. Germany had a feed-in tariff, which is a guaranteed pricing mechanism for the better part of 20 years to grow the sector. They are now switching that into an auction-based system, which is technology specific, to kind of control the growth a little bit. I come back to that later because Alberta is talking about an auction-based system as well, but in a different market stage. So interesting to compare the two. So that's a little bit the journey into a couple of countries. On a bigger European scale, you see there's more than 17,000 plants. We talked about 3 countries here that are highlighted in yellow. Total installed capacity over 8,000 megawatts. There's biogas plants in all 28 member countries in the European Union and Switzerland. Feed-in tariffs have been proven to be the most effective tool. And the biggest growth rate we see is again on the facilities that produce biomethane, renewable natural gas, for various purposes. Transportation fuels is one of them. So that's where Europe is with that. We're going back now to Canada. We're asking ourselves, why are we a little behind here on some of these things? And I put on this slide here, discouraging, some energy facts, discouraging or encouraging. Discouraging is the fact that there is a lot of resources that you might think makes this unnecessary. But on the other hand, you can argue we see now that depending on just one source of energy is not maybe the best strategy after all. So the encouraging thing here is that we have big potential to look at here. One of the things that still strikes me of all these statistics is that of all the leading economies in the world, Canada is the one that has the highest per capita energy consumption, twice as much as Germany and about 10 times as much as India. So there's a lot of energy here that can be replaced or more efficiently used. The challenges we're having here is, and you can pretty much start everywhere in this circle here, is we're seeing this as not really a priority, or in the past, I should say, we have not seen this as a priority because Canada is a resource-rich country. Energy costs are relatively low. When I hear people complaining here about energy prices, I keep telling everybody, you're very fortunate here when you have a 90-cent per liter gas fuel bill here, because in Europe it's about twice as much. We have not really waste pressing issues like in Europe. It's not densely populated, so it hasn't been a priority. Because it hasn't been a priority, political support has really been limited in the past and has not been very coordinated. We don't really have a legal framework that accommodates this, which relates to permitting and other legal aspects. We have a very scattered landscape, and biogas plants get permitted as oil plants and gas plants and power plants, but not as a biogas plant. We don't really have a supplier base, technology base. Everything we do, we typically go to Europe to do it, to get it. So all of this is a reason why this is challenging to do here in this part of the world. As a result of that, we really have in Canada a Ontario and the rest of Canada kind of situation. Ontario is leading the landscape with a bigger number of biogas plants that have been triggered by a supportive program by the Ontario Power Authorities that is similar to a FIT program, and we've seen some ag-based plants as a result of that. We have scattered, I would call it scattered projects around the other provinces, some in Quebec, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PI, Manitoba is difficult, very difficult. Saskatchewan, there's hardly anything. I skip Alberta for a second here because we're getting back to that. And then in BC, we see the biogas plants that are out there are most triggered by a program that is driven by Fortis BC, which is a renewable natural gas program. So most of the facilities in BC actually produce renewable natural gas, and Fortis has a program with interested customers to market that as a commodity. Hydro BC has a standing offer program, which I don't think triggers a lot of development. And then we're looking into Alberta. Alberta has some municipal applications and wastewater treatment plants, and Calgary has a wastewater treatment plant using biogas. Lethbridge has one, I believe Edmonton has one. And we have some scattered agricultural biogas facilities. Two are at the moment actually running. One of us is Lethbridge Biogas. One of us is the facility in Chin, which is about 20 kilometers east. And that's pretty much it. Another one that was operating is looking for a new owner, and that's the situation in Alberta. Lethbridge Biogas is part of a larger group. The group is called Bioenergy Producers Group, and these are the members of in that group that help us to do some political lobbying here. We have some industrial sources for biogas, which I haven't mentioned here. From the pulp and paper industry, there's two facilities that actually digest or collect the biogas that comes from their industrial wastewater sources. We have a project in the conceptual stage at an ethanol facility at Thermalex, and then there's some ag-based plants. I said two operating. One is on standby, and then there's two that we know of that are in various stages of development. Everything is on hold now because of the political situation. I'll get to that in a minute here. So that's kind of where we are in Alberta with that. So in very, very early stages, at its infancy, I would say. Lethbridge Biogas, that's us. We are a limited partnership between a local ownership group that has been built around the gentleman that Ted mentioned initially, Mr. Herbert. And we ended up partnering with a German technology company, Profitability Biogas, one of the biggest European biogas companies. They have built more than 400 facilities worldwide, and we're operating a 2.85 large-scale biogas cogeneration facility in Lethbridge. We're doing that for the better part of 3.5 years now. We had quite a story on the development. I'll get to that in a minute. If you want to have further information on our project specifically, we have a website. There's several videos of our plant. CCMC did one, David Dodge and Green Energy Futures did one. They're all on our website. You can go on the Alberta Energy website. There's a category of success stories. We're under there. You can go to the Alberta Emission Offset Registry or go to the Planety website. You can find a lot of details there. Why we really wanted to do this in this part of the world, and specifically in Lethbridge, is to prove the point that this is beneficial from a lot of aspects. And we are in the heart of agricultural southern Alberta. We are in the heart of Feedlot Alley, which is the area with the highest density of intensive livestock operations. Lethbridge has significant food processing capacities. So the angle of providing another option for organics, the added value for local agriculture with the benefits I mentioned earlier, to get a product that is reduced in smell, is increased in nutrients and nitrogen, that is less invasive for the environment. And then, of course, the green renewable electricity story. Southern Alberta wanted to promote itself as leader in renewable energy, stuff like that. So really put this in a spot to demonstrate all these benefits of biogas and what it can do. But it was a very rocky road, I can tell you that. We mentioned that somebody talked me into coming here in 2004. The project was already kind of in a brainstorming conceptual stage before that. The very first time I came to Canada to talk about this was September 11, 2001, 9/11. We were stuck here for a week because we couldn't fly home. I still remember that. So that's when we had a first meeting about this particular initiative in Lethbridge. There's a couple of these highlights here in the chart. I came here to work on this permanently in 2004. We had to switch locations because of some public resistance here. We went through a regulatory system that is not prepared to accommodate this, which was an interesting venture and took a while. We had some funding challenges and some funding highlights in and out. We worked with investors that were ready to sign on the bottom line twice and back out twice and all this good stuff. So it took us from 2004 to 2011, so 7 years, to actually being able to take a shovel and dig a hole, which is pretty incredible. From there, it was pretty smooth. We built a facility in 2 years or a year and a half and started operating it in the second half of 2013. So that was pretty straightforward once we get there. What we are specifically doing is, it goes back to the general concept of anaerobic digestion. We have organics from agriculture and food processing that we are putting into our anaerobic digestion process. We have 3 big anaerobic digesters. In the world of biogas, our facility is considered a large biogas facility, producing currently 3 megawatt of electricity, and we have the potential for another engine to produce another 1.4. We're taking the classic, I would call it the classic route of converting the biogas into electricity, and we're using the heat for our process. Future angles that we work on is a development on one is a development on the input piece, where we want to incorporate a process that's called thermal hydrolysis that will allow us to address a problem with the disposal of animal byproducts. And the other one, maybe down the road, is to increase or to advance the organic fertilizer piece to a component that actually is commercially helpful for the project, because at the moment it doesn't really create any revenue. So that's what we are doing in Lethbridge on a technical scale. Feedstock, we are increasing throughput every day, so to speak, but every year. We are the third year of operation. We have increased our numbers every year. We are in Alberta. The Alberta context here is Alberta is the highest generator of residential waste per capita in Canada. 40% typically is the rate of organics in that residential waste. We are a large food and beverage producing province, and we are a large cattle slaughtering province. So there's a lot of products that are suitable in Alberta for this process that anaerobic digestion facilities are able to use. That's how this looks from an aerial perspective. You see we are part of a little industrial development on the outskirts of Lethbridge here. You can see the flow of product, or you can envision the flow of product when you see these trucks that are lined up in front of that loading and unloading building where we unload material. We have a road, so that allows us for trucks to drive through that building, and we have a weigh scale where this is all recorded and kept track of. And then we have the three anaerobic digesters that I talked about. We have raw material storage on the input side. We have a final, the biggest digester tank here we have, that's our post-storage tank, our storage for the end product. Our concept is to bring the end product back to the farm partners we have in the project that we get manure from. And then we have on the energy piece here, we have I talked about the combined heat and power plants. You see that here on the very bottom. There are two containerized units that are sitting there with a little building which houses a switchgear, and then there's a little transformer. And then what you don't see, there's an underground cable here, and you see the power lines to the east of that run along the east of the facilities. We have a tie in there, and that's how we connect to the grid. So that's how a large-scale biogas plant in Alberta looks. We business model, we tap into most of the resources that I was talking about before. We are connected to the Alberta grid, and we're selling electricity into the Alberta power pool. These days, that's not a lot of fun to do because prices have plummeted, and we're seeing historic low, never seen before price levels that surprise the heck out of everyone. We get some what we call tipping fees for the disposal of organics and for the diversion of organics from landfill. We have a registered offset project in the Alberta offset system, which allows us to create carbon offsets that large emitters can use for supply compliance purposes. And we were able to sell those. We got some temporary support that has expired. That was a program put in place by the old PC government that was supporting Alberta bioenergy producers, which was very helpful. And we hope to see some new programs here in the future, and I'll talk to that in a minute. Local sustainability, the good things we're doing for the community. These numbers speak hopefully for themselves, gives you a little bit of an idea of what's going on. We have delivered green renewable electricity to the community, not contractually to the community, but into the grid in the community here. In 2015, more than 12,000 megawatt hours. That with we have diverted organics from regional landfills, more than 5,000 tons in 2015. Goes back to the saving of landfill space. We have created some jobs. Like our facility has created about 10 jobs, 7 to 8 full-time jobs, 2 to 3 part-time jobs in a new industry. We have contributed to the diversification of the economy. So all these things are buzzwords, political buzzwords we hear today. Biogas is a good example of how this can be achieved. When I see the municipal tax bill every day, every year coming in June, that's something that we contribute and give back to the community. So a lot of things here that happen. On a little bigger picture here, this is a chart that I took out of a study that the Canadian Biogas Association did. Where do we want to see this going on a national level? And I mean, it comes back to the concept of the circular economy. Biocluster is a buzzword that is around. It relates to the co-location of symbiotic businesses that have a waste problem, that need energy, so we can really have things going around in a circle. We want to see a range of small and bigger facilities that tap into the electricity, also in the renewable energy, in the renewable natural gas market. So we see this as a potential to grow, but in order to do that, we're coming back now to the political context, Alberta, and the new climate change leadership plan. Everything that we've seen so far, everything that was announced, is very positive and very supportive for our cause. We have the coal phase out and the 30% target for renewables. We know that the ASO is working on a renewable electricity program, the auction program that is to be launched shortly. We have several other pieces of legislation under review. We get a carbon tax implemented on January 1st next year, and this is generally all good. And I get a lot of people visiting the plant, and I get a lot of questions, and everybody's saying, you know, this must be all good for you. And I said yes, and then I always say but. And the but here is that currently in the 2016 is the most difficult year we ever had as a facility, and the most difficult year for every bioenergy facility in the province. The reason for that is that a lot of these pieces are moving targets. A lot of these pieces are not implemented. There's a high degree of market uncertainty in the market. Projects are all stalled. And on top of all of the uncertainty, we have historically low power prices. When we designed the facility, and in all of our business models and all of our projections and all of other people's projections, including the large utilities, power prices, long-term power prices should be 4 times at least of what we're seeing today by now. That hasn't happened for various reasons, so we're struggling with that. And we have seen some plant closures already. So we are cautiously optimistic that this will change with the implementations of the various pieces. But at the moment, again, we are in difficult waters at the moment, so to speak. The vision we have really for Alberta is that the climate change leadership plan that the NDP government has will put strong political leadership, will show strong political leadership here to promote this. We struggle with that, and it goes back to the diversity of what biogas does. Nobody's really responsible, right? That is reflective in the regulatory system. It's reflective in the political system, because you're touching on agriculture, you're touching on energy, you're touching on environment, you are touching on job creation and economic development, and these are all very good things. But you're not easily be put into one drawer of your desk, and that's the problem. And nobody is really responsible. So that we've seen in the past a little bit of tossing around, who should deal with this, no, you should deal with this. So we hope with the climate change leadership plan and the climate change office that this is now all in one hand, and will create an environment for these types of projects that really will allow this to thrive, and we see really a good potential for Alberta. I promise I haven't rehearsed that, but I see it's 11:40 on my clock here, so I got to it pretty timely, and I think, Ted, we can open it up to questions and answers now.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Stefan. So for the remainder of our hour, I would ask anyone if you want to pose some questions. If you hover your cursor at the bottom of the screen there with the Q&A function, and post any questions there. But of course, Stefan, I mean, one thing that was obvious that I'll just throw out there is the relationship to the agricultural community, specifically the feedlot operators, seems to mean unnatural. And you've already commented on that you've already got obviously a number of major feedlots involved in supplying for the plant.
Yeah, I mean, feedlot is one potential source. We are dealing largely with, just for simplicity at the moment, we're largely dealing with operators of larger hog and dairy facilities, because the anaerobic digestion process is really a wet process, and liquid manure is an easier product to deal with. So our process base from a feedstock perspective is liquid manure, and then we're adding sources from the processing community, and like I said, the Lethbridge area is a good place to start, but there's other areas in the province that would be good places to do that, and yeah.
So we've got a question here for you to respond to, Stefan. With Lethbridge and Alberta being a colder climate than, say, the Toronto area or BC Lower Mainland, is the potential for profitability less in Alberta, since you need to expend more energy to keep the facility sufficiently heated?
Clear answer to that is no.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, very, very clear answer is no, and the reason for that is twofold. Number one, we don't have a commercial value yet for the heat. I said we are using the waste heat for providing heat to our digesters, and we have a surplus of heat, and we're not getting any value out of it. And the second piece to the answer of that question is really the difference in doing this in colder climates versus warmer climates is a little bit of more insulation on your tanks and a couple other pipings that you should insulate, which is taking care of winter and frost issues, which is easily done during construction, and then when you do that properly, you don't even have an impact. We got questions on that a lot of times, and when we started our operation in December of 2013, it was the worst December since I was here. We had temperatures plummeting. We had minus 37, 38 degrees, and we figured out the little pieces that we needed to figure out right away, because we had to, but it's really just very, very little impacts that can be easily addressed.
Excellent. Another question's come in. Has there been any analysis as to smaller community installations, as in Europe? How small is too small, Stefan?
Well, you can't really, technically, there is no too small, right? I said in Europe and in Germany, and the new support environment in Germany is targeting facilities smaller than 75 kW. We are 3,000 kW, right? So I mean, we are talking much, much smaller. The question is does the economic environment allow that? Because you have a certain economies of scale in these facilities if you go bigger, but with the right mechanisms in place and the on-farm installations, really the smaller installations, in my opinion, have the biggest potential, because an operation like ours gets complex pretty quick, But the on-farm operations with simple feedstock sources are much easier to operate and to handle. And if the support environment and the regulatory environment is set correctly, then there is no really a too small.
Okay, great. So the next question, Stefan, is kind of like a two-part question. So I'll start with the first part. Are you using your waste heat to run greenhouses? And if not, are you planning to run greenhouses in the future?
Well, the greenhouse story is an ideal one. There is a lot of plants, or there's some plants in Europe that do that. It's an ideal application because of heat and also CO2. Unfortunately, where we are located, there is no greenhouses, and if there were, I would love to tie into that, but we're not doing that. So the question is no.
Mm-hmm. But with future plants,
if you are able to, and that's kind of this model of the biocluster, the symbiotic location of facilities. If you can locate facilities close to a greenhouse or vice versa, or to somebody that needs the heat or other byproducts you have, then that's an ideal scenario, and it increases, of course, the economic bottom line too, because you have another revenue source from heat, for example.
Excellent. The next question is there any work being done to handle wastewater biosolids as a feedstock?
Question that always comes up. The only issue we have with biosolids is a social and a regulatory one, not a technical one, right? And biosolids work as a feedstock like manure works as a feedstock from a technical perspective. There's no restrictions to that. It produces gas, and a lot of wastewater treatment plants create gas from their primary treatment, and then the biosolids still can be processed in the biogas plant. Socially, regulatory-wise, we put restrictions on that because there is sometimes a stigma to land apply biosolids to fields that we grow food on. So it is not really a technical issue. Our plant is not permitted to do that for the regulatory reasons, but we could easily do that.
Okay, the next question is, could one have individual biogas plants at each intensive livestock operation, for example, at individual feedlots? Have these right on site, no need to truck in waste, one plant at one feedlot? Could that work, Stefan?
Yes, of course. That's the on-farm concept that I was referring to earlier, rather than the off-farm concept. The off-farm concept, we use that to come to a certain size to be able to demonstrate the full potential of biogas and what it can do in a larger picture. The on-farm solutions, in my opinion, are preferable because they are less complex. They don't include as much logistical effort, trucking. We don't have to put a lot of thoughts into transportation and stuff. So if you have enough of a feedstock base in your own operation, that is a easier scenario to deal with.
Okay. Next question is, what are the Europeans doing with their excess heat? Is it going to waste currently?
No, Europe is the application of district heating is very, very common. District heating is really a concept that you heat with hot water, and instead of having a gas furnace at your home, an individual gas furnace, you have a heat exchanger at your home that extracts the heat out of these district heating system, and the district heating systems are fed by combined heat and power plants. Sorry. Not only from biogas, but from natural gas applications too, and that's the most common use of heat in Europe. So what we're doing here is not ideal because we're not using the full potential of the energy.
Mhm. No, that's excellent. I guess what I would sort of poll our listeners, any more questions for Stefan to consider? I guess while people are kind of considering that, Stefan, obviously the Lethbridge Biogas plant is proved the concept. I think Alberta is keenly interested in green energy sources. I would say at all levels of government. So I've really appreciated the comprehensiveness that you've approached this topic, Stefan, and really done, I think, a wonderful job introducing the listeners and myself to the breadth of experience across both Europe and Scandinavia. And of course, Alberta is the beneficiary of some of that expertise within yourself and your colleagues at Lethbridge Biogas. So, I think you've done an excellent job in introducing this concept to Alberta, and I've really appreciated the presentation.
Thank you.
Excellent. I guess I'd also like to introduce at the end of September, the next presentation will be with the National Climate Learning Network, which is affiliated with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We're having a couple of speakers from that organization at the end of September. So I guess in closing, Stefan, thanks so much for a wonderful presentation. And we'll be posting it to the Municipal Climate Change Action Center YouTube channel. And again, thanks so much for this wonderful presentation, Stefan.
Thank you, Ted. Two things I would like to mention. Lethbridge Biogas is part of an event province-wide next Friday on, I believe, the 9th, which is called Green Doors Open. So we'll have our doors open for the interested public and whoever wants to see what we're doing. That happens on September the 9th between 10 and 12. And then myself, I will have a shorter version of this presentation. I was invited to the Recycling Council of Alberta conference in Jasper in September. I believe it's September 28th and 9th in the Fairmont, in the Jasper Park Lodge there. So I will have a shorter version of this, maybe a little bit different spin on it, more focused on the Alberta situation on that conference.
Excellent, Stefan. Well, again, thanks so much for presenting into the series, and I'm sure some folks will look you up at those two venues you mentioned.
Thank you, Ted.
Okay, thanks so much.